4. Whose coffin is this anyway? The boys all crowded around the box, forgetting in their curiosity about their narrow escape from drowning. "It's a coffin, sir." "Yes, I can see that. Thank you, Warty Hog," snapped Gobber the Belch. "The question is, whose?" The answer was written right underneath the words, "Do not open this coffin," in letters scratched out with some kind of dagger and stained with something that might once have been blood. "Cursed be he who disturbs the remains of Grimbeard the Ghastly, the greatest pirate who ever struck terror into the Inner Isles." Hiccup felt a cold, clammy shiver run down his back, and he suddenly knew that something really bad was going to happen. Grimbeard the Ghastly had been Hiccup's own great-great-grandfather. The lost treasure of Grimbeard the Ghastly was a popular hooligan saga. It told of how Grimbeard had won a glorious treasure through his brilliance at piracy and sword fighting, a treasure that included his famous sword, the Stormblade. But after 20 years of glorious rule, Grimbeard had disappeared on a mysterious quest, and neither he nor the treasure were ever seen again. And now, here out of the blue, 100 years later, his coffin had appeared back on the shores of Berk. It was spooky. "Oh," chattered Warty Hog in excitement. "Do you think there might be treasure in there, sir? Can we open it, sir? Please, sir, can we open it?" All the other boys joined in the clamour, except for Hiccup. Hiccup knew that Grimbeard had been the ultimate in pirateness, the greediest, grisliest, goriest Viking who had ever sailed and slew and farted his way across the northern seas. Treasure or no treasure, if a man like Grimbeard the Ghastly was telling you not to mess with his coffin, it was Hiccup's personal opinion that you ought to listen. Even if he had been dead for 100 years. Particularly if he'd been dead for 100 years. "Right," said Gobber, just as excited as everybody else. "We're going to have to forget about the advanced rudery lesson. This is an important discovery, and I think we should take it straight to Stoic the Vast and the Council of Elders. Bear Hug, Sharp Knife, Warty Hog, Clueless, pick it up and carry it back to the hooligan village." The boys hauled the coffin onto their shoulders. "Don't just hang about shivering, you lazy lugfish," Gobber bellowed crazily. "This is pirate training, not a holiday with your mother on the mainland. Quick marcha! 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. He set off at a brisk trot towards the hooligan village. The boys sighed and began to stumble after him. Snotlout and Dogsbreath the Durbrain sauntered over to Hiccup, who was sitting trying to catch his breath on a large rock, shivering violently. "A shame that Dogsbreath was interrupted," sneered Snotlout, "just when things were getting interesting. Don't you think, Dogsbreath?" "Yeah," grinned Dogsbreath the Durbrain. "I reckon," said Snotlout thoughtfully to the remaining boys, "that Hiccup must be the most pathetic sword fighter I have ever seen. Don't you think, guys? I mean, face it, Hiccup, somebody who fights like a granny with a back problem is never going to be chief of this tribe." "Oh, and so who is going to be chief of the tribe if Hiccup isn't?" asked Fishlegs, still lying spread-eagled on the sand in the exact position where he'd fallen off the coffin. "Let me guess. You, I suppose." Snotlout flexed his muscles, making the skeleton tattooed on his right bicep grin smugly. "I am the obvious choice," he said. "I've got noble blood." Snotlout was Hiccup's cousin, the son of Baggybum the Beerbelly, the chief's younger brother. "Charisma, good looks." Snotlout stroked the rather unpleasant little straggly hairs on his upper lip that he was trying to grow into a moustache. "And I'm brilliant at absolutely everything." Unfortunately, this was true. Snotlout was a natural at mindless violence, superb at advanced rudery, and practically everything else. "Particularly sword fighting," said Snotlout, drawing his sword from its scabbard. The other boys gasped. "Wow!" breathed Speedyfist. "The latest double-sided extra-biting super sword! Curving inner edges, silver point finish. Where did you get that from, Snotlout?" "This is the flash cut," boasted Snotlout, swishing the beautiful sword around so that everybody could get a good look. "Makes that silly swift point scare maker that Dogsbreath lost for you look pretty weak, doesn't it, Hiccup? Let me show you how sword fighting should be done. This," sneered Snotlout, lunging athletically, "is a perfect pointer." Hiccup dodged. And this is the destroyer's defence. Snotlout gave an animal howl and brought the sword down over his head, stopping just before he cut Hiccup in half. And that, jeered Snotlout, slashing the flash cut expertly from side to side and then leaping forward suddenly, the sword ending up just inches away from Hiccup's heart. That is a Grimbeard's grapple. But I expect a loser like you, who couldn't even beat a 3-year-old in nappies, hasn't even heard of moves like that. Hiccup said nothing. That, dear cousin, sneered Snotlout, is how to sword fight. He put his sword back in its scabbard. Yup, he said, very pleased with himself. I'm a genius. I'm going to make the best chief this tribe has ever had. It's just a shame, said Fishlegs, that your brain isn't as big as one of your nostrils. Snotlout looked irritated for a second as all the other boys laughed. He grabbed Hiccup by the scruff of the neck and lifted him clear off the ground. Amazing how the wooden case to that sword fell off, wasn't it? He spat right into Hiccup's face. You were lucky this time, but the question is, can you be lucky all the time? Think about it, loser. Come on, dog's breath. Let's leave the girlies to get their beauty sleep. He dropped Hiccup, and as he went, he trod heavily and deliberately on one of Fishlegs' hands. Whoops, laughed Snotlout. Huh, 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 snorted Dog's Breath the Durbrain, and they jogged off. If Snotlout is ever chief of this tribe, I'm emigrating, said Fishlegs, shaking his hand. Are you all right, Fishlegs? Asked Hiccup with concern as he gazed down on Fishlegs, still lying flat on his back. Perfect, croaked Fishlegs, coughing up a bit more seawater. I do love an early morning swim. How about you? Oh, couldn't be better, really, said Hiccup bleakly, taking off one of his boots and pouring out a flood of seawater on a couple of small fish. My first day at pirate training, and I've already been humiliated by my pathetic sword fighting, beaten to a pulp, shipwrecked, and narrowly escaped death by drowning, and it's not even 10 o'clock yet. Maybe it was the sword that was the problem, suggested Fishlegs, kindly but untruthfully. Hiccup brightened up. You could be right, he said eagerly. It felt a bit light in my hands. Perhaps I need something a bit chunkier, to get some weight behind my swing. He did a few imaginary lunges in the air. That must be it, because I still have this feeling that sword fighting is going to be my thing, Yes, said Fishlegs, not wanting to hurt Hiccup's feelings by mentioning that it had been the worst display of sword fighting he had seen, ever. And you need a lot more practice, don't you think? Hiccup nodded enthusiastically. Anyway, he said, we need to get after the others. I'm freezing, and have a horrible feeling that some idiot is going to suggest opening that coffin, which says quite clearly, do not open. It would be just the sort of mindlessly stupid thing they would do. What do you think could be in it? Asked Fishlegs. I don't know, said Hiccup, but a pirate like Grimbeard the Ghastly won't have hidden the treasure in it without booby-trapping it in some way. You read what it said on the top. A man like him could have thought of all sorts of unpleasant surprises. Fishlegs sighed and struggled to his feet. They set off slowly towards the hooligan village, Toothless hitching a ride on Hiccup's helmet. They wouldn't open it, would they? Worried Fishlegs. Surely, surely, surely. They couldn't be that stupid. Five. Do not open a coffin that says "Do not open" on the front. As soon as they got to the hooligan village, Hiccup and Fishlegs changed into dry-ish clothes. Berk was one of those damp places where clothes never really dried. They just became warm and wet, rather than cold and wet. They hurried as quickly as they could towards the Great Hall. By the time they got there, Stoic had called a big meeting of everybody, and the Great Hall was already packed to bursting with great hairy hooligans, jostling each other for a good view of the coffin, which had been placed on a table in front of the fire. Bit by bit, Hiccup and Fishlegs managed to wriggle their way through the crowd to the front.
"Ah, Hiccup, there you are,"
said Hiccup's father, Stoic the Vast, absent-mindedly, as he consulted with the other elders in front of the coffin. Stoic was a terrifying, red-headed bull of a man, whose belly turned a corner a good foot or two before the rest of him.
"Interesting find you've made here, my boy,"
said Stoic, ruffling his son's hair proudly.
"The lost treasure of Grimbeard the Ghastly, eh?"
"Yes, father, but," said Hiccup.
"We're just about to open it,"
said Stoic. But what I'm trying to say is, interrupted old Wrinkly, the cleverest and most ancient elder of the hooligan tribe, it is written quite clearly on the top, "Do not open this coffin. Cursed be he who disturbs the remains of Grimbeard the Ghastly, the greatest pirate who ever struck terror into the inner isles." In my considerable experience, it is always a good idea not to open a coffin that says, "Do not open," on the front. "I agree," said Hiccup nervously. "Grimbeard the Ghastly was a nasty piece of work. Anybody who opens that coffin could be in for a horrible shock."
Rubbish,
scoffed Stoic the Vast.
a warning like that to put off grave robbers should not stay the hand of fearsome Vikings like ourselves. Shall we, who laugh in the face of death and spit in the eye of the great typhoon, quail at a simple curse to scare infants and old men?
Cries of "No" and "Not likely, governor."
All those in favour of opening up the box and seeing whether the lost treasure of Grimbeard the Ghastly is inside, say aye.
"Aye!" bellowed out every member of the hooligan tribe, except for Fishlegs, old Wrinkly, and Hiccup. "Run for your lives!" yelped Toothless, and hid in Hiccup's shirt. Fishlegs edged backwards into the crowd. "Not a good idea, not a good idea, not a good idea," muttered Hiccup. He started backing away from the coffin as Stoic fiddled clumsily with the iron clasps. "Not a good idea, not a good idea, not a good idea," repeated Hiccup as Stoic slowly creaked up the coffin lid. The coffin lid dropped open with a bang. Stoic jumped away to avoid being splashed by the seawater gushing out of it from all sides. Everybody else tried very hard not to look nervous. Stoic peered into the coffin. There was a bit of a pause.